Hi everyone, my name's Aubrey and I'm a sophomore at Chapman University. I'm majoring in biochemistry and molecular biology with a minor in health science. I'm here to talk to you today about genetics. So what are genes? Our genes are located on our DNA, and that DNA is found within the nucleus of our cells. These genes code or give the blueprint for everything in our body. This includes the characteristics of how we look and what makes us unique. So they're not genes like your pants, they're genes like in our DNA. So who is Mendel? Gregory Mendel is known as the father of genetics, and he was a botanist who discovered a lot of what we still use today in genetics from his pea plant experiment. So what we thought before Mendel did his experiment was known as the blending model. So we thought when two organisms came together, one was tall in this example, he used a tall pea plant, and a short pea plant, he thought that all of the pea plants were going to be medium, and that all of these medium pea plants, if they reproduced, they were all going to be medium too, so that it was a blending of the two characteristics of tall and short. Instead, what he actually found was that when he mixed a tall and a short pea plant, they did in fact make all tall. And when these all tall plants reproduced, he saw 3 tall plants and 1 short plant, which was unexpected. And we now know that this 1 short pea plant is showing something known as a recessive trait, and we're going to talk more about that. So let's define some terms. A chromosome is a structure of DNA that carries our genes. That's what this picture is showing here. In humans, we have 23 pairs of chromosomes, which means we have 46 individual chromosomes. Alleles are pairs of genes that determine the same trait. For example, in Mendel's experiment, the pea plants had alleles of tall, medium, and short. Our dominant allele is the single allele that wins the competition for the physical trait. So in that example, whichever the tall pea plants were dominant because the majority of them came out looking like that. However, as Mendel found, we can have a recessive allele show. This is a single allele that normally loses the competition for the physical trait, but we'll see later that sometimes these actually show in our final organism. So genotype versus phenotype. Our genotype is a combination of letters that describes the genetic makeup of an individual. Our phenotype is the actual physical trait that is shown. So that's what we can see with our eyes. For example, a genotype could be big B, little b. And what we see with our eyes is that that person has brown hair. So you can kind of think of it as genotype describing what's happening inside of us, whereas phenotype is showing what we can see outwardly. We also describe genotypes as being either heterozygous or homozygous. Heterozygous means that these two alleles are different. So we have one big B and one little b. That's what heterozygous means. You can also see that right here in this picture. The middle purple chromosome has a big B and a little b, 2 different alleles. However, if the alleles are the same, they're called homozygous. We can see that in the green chromosome. We have 2 big A's. All right, so let's do our example. At this point, there's a worksheet attached to this video, and you can go ahead and download it and print it and follow along. I'm going to be doing a trait called handedness. You can pick whatever trait you want. I listed some there. It might be fun to go and ask your family members and see, compare and contrast your different traits. So step 1, choose your physical trait. You can choose whatever you want and follow along with this video. I chose handedness, which basically means whichever hand you write with. So my mom writes with her right hand and my dad writes with his left hand. So I thought this would be an interesting example to show. So after you have your trait, you're going to assign your dominance. So you choose which trait you want to be dominant and which trait you want to be recessive. It doesn't really matter, so you can choose whatever you want. For this example, I'm doing right hand is dominant and left hand is recessive. This is actually what we see in real life, is that most people are right-handed, whereas some people do have that left-handed recessive trait. All right, so now you're going to assign your genotype. So for our dominant allele, we're saying that's right-handedness. I'm assigning this to be big H, little h. And because it has that big H in there, that's what is going to make it dominant and make it right-handed. Whereas my recessive allele, I'm going to have 2 little h's. We can't have any big letters in our recessive allele because that's going to make it dominant. So we need to have 2 little letters. So question, are these genotypes homozygous or heterozygous? So for our dominant allele, which is big H, little h, that's going to be heterozygous because we have 2 different letters. Whereas our recessive allele, 2 little h's, that's going to be homozygous because they're the same. All right, so now we're going to make our Punnett square. By doing this, we're going to see the probability of my parents' offsprings and what the probability is of my brother and I having right-handedness or left-handedness. So we're going to put our genotypes into the top and the left of our Punnett square. So my mom's genotype is a big H, little h, and my dad's genotype is 2 little h's. Now we're going to bring one from mom and one from dad into each box. So for our first box, we brought a big H from mom and a little h from dad. For the next box, we brought a little h from mom's genotype and a little h from dad's genotype. The third box, we have a big H and a little h. And then the fourth box, we have 2 little h's. So what does this mean? This means that there's a probability that 50% of my parents' kids are going to be right-handed and 50% of my parents' kids are going to be left-handed. I found these numbers by looking at my Punnett square. I can see that 2 out of 4 of my genotypes that I crossed have those big H's, which means they're going to show our dominant trait, which is right-handedness. Whereas 2 of my genotypes are going to have left-handed because they have no big H's. They just have little h's, so they're going to show our recessive trait, which is left-handedness. Now, what actually happened with my family? My brother and I are both right-handed. So my parents had 50% chance that one of us was going to be right-handed and one of us is going to be left-handed. However, both of us are right-handed. In conclusion, we've learned a lot by investigating about our parents' genes, and we can learn a lot about ourselves. Mendel's P experiment may be simple, but it's taught us a lot about the fundamentals of genetics. The field of genetics is very complex, and it's ever expanding as we're learning more and more and expanding our technologies of how we can test these different genotypes. Thanks for watching.